Hey everyone, I'm Clayfect, and today it is time for this little guy, our very last Tutootsie. If you want to follow along on this tutorial series, then I would highly recommend you watching the base video first, before you get right back to little Devie and me. But otherwise, let's just get started with little Devious Devie, shall we? As always, we're starting with the cheeks, and we are doing that by cutting a ball, so they are going to be pretty equal in size before we put them on. Now, devious, facetious, scheming, they are all quiet emotions, which means we are going to place the cheeks sort of neutral, making the small hints and small details show this type of mindset. But with Devie's cheeks smoothed in and in place, we are moving on to his little mouth and nose. Now for his whole lower face area, I'm going with a mix between a horse and a dragon. I don't know why, but I thought it would look cute. So first we're simply going to draw out the mouth, before I take a snake of clay and make a tiny circle on each side of the snout. These are going to be the nostrils for our little devious monster. When the circles are done, we are poking inside the middle of the circle, emphasizing these big nostrils I want. Also, I hope they will give him a more nosy look. Get it? Nosy? Anyway, with the nostrils deep enough, it is time to smooth the tiny snakes of clay. Using our wound rubber shaper tool. I'm using this round rubber shaper tool to pretty much both the cheeks and the nose, because I want little Devie's face to be a little more defined. I'm also giving him a little indent in between the nostrils, simply to add some details to the face and make it more interesting. Now with the mouth done, I'm building up his cheeks some more, simply to make his smile a little smaller and therefore a little more devious, but also to make his face a little more defined. That is why I used a curved rubber shaper tool at the corner of the mouth. Speaking of tools, I do have an affiliate link down below where you can buy everything you're going to need to make these Tutootsies. And I will get a small percentage of that simply to buy more clay, guys. So if you want to support my clay addiction, then please do. Now for the eyelids, we're going to do something a bit different, because we want these sort of squinting, devious eyes and not these bright, happy or sad eyes. So we are taking a strip of clay and placing it sort of high up at the top and at the bottom of the eye, before we are blending them in. I will admit though, he does look more tired than devious at this point, but as I said, being devious or scheming or anything like that is sort of a quiet, so to speak. It's where you don't actually want anyone to see your emotion or want anyone to know how you're feeling. So that is why everything I do is pretty neutral. And I'm only giving small clues, like with the eyebrow, where I take a snake of clay and place it very arched and curved. Sort of in a neutral position, but then again, not really though. That is why I'm using my spoon tool and not my rubber shaper tool for this job. But with his facial features in place, let's move on to the feet, where I cut out 2 triangles, creating this cartoonish dinosaur foot, before I gently round his toes using my fingers, being careful not to making them too long. With that done, I draw out the nail this time, using my dentist tool, creating a nail that I'm actually going to make a little bit more elongated and a little bit more pointy, like so. And just like that, we have some cute dinosaur feet that we're going to place and blend in at the bottom of little Devie, before we go back and work on the face some more, creating his little ears. Now I decided to make some floppy fantasy ears. I don't know why, but I created them by cutting out 2 triangles that are then rounded before I start pressing in some indents in the ear using my round rubber shaper tool, creating these fishy, draggy, fantasy troll ears. Now I will admit this Tutootsie is probably one of the more stranger ones, and it was very difficult for me to get this devious and scheming emotion flow. Clayfect also had her job cut out for her with this one, I have to say. But I digress. With the ears placed as I want them, all I have to do is smooth them in using my spoon tool. And with that, it was onto his tail, probing a wire pretty firmly into his caboose, so I almost felt bad about it before I shaped out the wire as I wanted the tail. Satisfied with the tail's position, all I had to do was trim it down before I yet again took it off, giving me easy access to adding the clay. Now I did that by shaping out the tail and then cut it halfway through all the way down before I clasped the clay on to the tail, making a super easy and simple long thin tail. All I had to do now was to smooth the tail before I yet again probe poor Devie. But with the tail in place, all I had to do was blend it in before I start giving it some details. Now I was going for this sort of troll line-ish tail, so I rolled up a lot of very tiny snakes of clay that are gently placed together and just kept going like that to make this tuft of hair. When I was satisfied with the volume of hair, I took a tiny ball stylist and poked it at the bottom of the hair tuft, smashing some of the hair in the process. That was an easy fix though, since I only had to take my dentist tool and sort of pull the hairs out like you see me doing here. And with the tuft good as new, it just needed a little bit of bacon bond before we could press it on to the end of the tail. And just like that, the tail was done. So now it's time for some accessory, and I decided to go for a hat. I cut it out a circle before I placed a half ball onto the circle. And with it looking somewhat decent, I moved on and flattened a snake of clay that I traced all around the hat to make the band. You can't really see it in the recording, but I am actually pressing my finger up in the middle of the bottom of the hat, simply to make this indent so I can place it and it will fit his head. That is why my index finger is keep being at the bottom of the hat. But with that done, all we had to do was curve the fluffy part of the hat a bit before we gently place it with some bacon bond. I also decided to give him a lock of hair. So when I'm done placing the item that must not be mentioned again because I've said hat way too many times, I scraped some small clay doodads with my dentist tool before I placed them. Now you're probably wondering why a hat and why that type of hat. And it's pretty simple actually. Some items just bear a little more symbolism and a little more meaning than others. Like with our other Tutootsie Sadie, he is holding a flower that has seen better days. If he had been holding a bright sunflower, the emotion of sadness wouldn't have come as crossed as strong. And in Devie's case, I wanted him to look scheming and devious, which is why I took a hat that the Mafia and many other cartoonish villains has been using, making his manipulative nature come out a little bit stronger. Finally done with that item, it is time for some texture. And this time we're doing it by pretty much lubricating him all over his body with some bacon bond. This way, no matter what type of thing I'm pressing into the clay, there's going to be a faint copy of that texture. I'm using a homemade foam finger to make this sort of snakeskin appearance. But you can pretty much use anything. Just make sure that the layer of bacon bun isn't too thick. Now with his texturing done, he was ready for his first bake. On the package it says to bake it for 15 minutes on 130 degrees Celsius, that is 275 in Fahrenheit I believe. But being the nervous Nelly that I am, I prefer to bake him for a bit longer, 25 minutes to be more precise, on a 220 Celsius, that is 238 I think in Fahrenheit. After he had baked and had time to cool down, it was time to work on the arms. And we're doing that by trimming the wires before we bend the arms as we want them. With that done, all we had to do was roll out a thick snake of clay, measuring it, before we cut the arms to size, like so. With the arms the appropriate length now, we just had to cut half grade fluid before we also clasped them on, same as we did with the tail. Now with the clay on, all I had to do was to shape and smooth it until I was satisfied. Now with any type of emotion, even though facial expression is very important, body language is also just as important. That is why I decided that I wanted little Devie to tap his fingertips in this classical evil villain manner I was going for. So that is why I'm measuring and fitting a little bit more, because I need the hands to be very close together without touching each other. Speaking of the hands, we are creating them by the same method as we created the cheeks and the feet, making sure they are sort of equal in size before we are starting cutting out the fingers in the ball of clay. But with his fingers cut, so to speak, all we had to do was to spread them out before we gently wound them, being careful not to make them too long neither. I want our little Tutootsie villain to be a little chubby, stubby Tutootsie villain. Now with the fingers pretty much as we want them, it is time to work on his little thumb. And there's a simple trick of doing that. If you take a small snake of clay and place it sort of tilted, just like we have our thumb naturally, and then blend it in, it will give the best effect of a thumb muscle, making it easier to shape and easier to play and just make it look more natural. And just like that, his hands are done, are ready for some placement. When we have smoothed the hands in, we are trying to place them as we want them to, and this can be sort of a finicky process that can take a lot of back and forth before you are satisfied. The most important thing here is to not give up. I'm using my trusted rubber shaper tool to place each fingers as I want them. Now with them finally looking good, all we have to do is giving his arms the same treatment we gave the rest of his body, and then he's off to the oven again for his final bake. Now of course without paint he's not completely done, and as I have said, a lot of this expression is in the details, so to really bring him to life, Clayfect really need to bring her A game in. Her video is going to be the very last of this Tutootsie series. But that doesn't mean that we are not going to cheat and have a little bit of a sneak peek at him now, looking at all Clayfect's hard work with him. Here just me imitating Clayfect before I reveal him. And there he is. Isn't he just devious? I'm just so very happy with this one. Especially because I know Clayfect swore and cursed at this poor little Tutootsie so much. It was really an entertaining element, guys. So if you want to see how she did what she did, the pattern on the back and all of that, then go watch the very last video of this series. Speaking of this series, please do me a favor and go down and write in the comment section below what you think of the Tutootsies. Do you like them? Do you want to see a season 2? Or are you pretty tootsied out now? It would really help me and the channel out a lot to get a little bit of insight in what you want to see. Also, while you're there, please consider liking this video or maybe even subscribe. It will really make my day. But at last, guys, it is time for me to sign off. Thank you so much for watching. I hope to see you next time. But if you can wait until next time, then there's a square to your right where you're going to see another little Tutootsie get made. Why not hit that and hear more about these weird tutorial Tutootsies? But until then, bye!